They found a wedding ring still warm in the cold earth outside Redemption, Texas in the spring of 1887. It had been buried 6 feet down, clasped in a fist that shouldn't have been there anymore. The grave it came from had been empty for 3 years, but the widow, she'd been seen that very night, standing at the edge of the cemetery with a shovel in her hands and dirt under her fingernails, whispering to something that whispered back. Her name was Mary Ann Colt, and she'd worn black every day since they buried her husband in 1884. The town remembered that funeral. Thunder rolling across the plains like God's own judgment, rain turning the cemetery to red mud, and Mary Ann standing at the graveside without shedding a single tear, her eyes fixed on the pine box like she was memorizing every nail. Thomas Colt had been a good man. Everyone said so. Railroad surveyor, honest, kept his word, loved his wife more than whiskey, which in those parts made him practically a saint. But 3 days after they put him in the ground, someone saw candlelight flickering in their cabin window past midnight, and the next morning, Mary Ann was at the general store buying salt, pounds and pounds of it, enough to line every door and window she owned. "You all right, Mrs. Colt?" the shopkeeper asked. She looked at him with eyes that hadn't slept. "Do you believe in promises that don't end with death?" He didn't know how to answer that. Neither did anyone else. For 3 years, Mary Ann lived alone in that cabin on the edge of town. She didn't take callers, didn't go to church. The only time anyone saw her was at dusk, walking out toward the mesa where the old silver mine had collapsed years before. She'd stand there until the stars came out, then walk back home in the dark, without a lantern. Folks said she'd gone mad with grief, but they didn't know what she was waiting for. Then came the stranger. He rode into Redemption on a night when the moon hung low and red like a wound in the sky. Tall, pale, wore a black duster that didn't have a speck of dust on it despite the miles. His horse was the color of smoke, and its eyes reflected light wrong, too bright, too aware. He didn't stop at the saloon. He didn't ask for a room. He rode straight to the cemetery, dismounted, and stood at Thomas Colt's grave for an hour without moving. Just stood there, head bowed, like he was praying or confessing or both. The undertaker saw him from his window, thought about going out there with a shotgun, decided against it when the stranger turned his head and looked right at him through 100 yards of darkness. By morning, the stranger was gone, but Mary Ann's door was open, and the salt lines had been swept away. They found her 3 days later, out at the collapsed mine, sitting on a flat rock with her skirts covered in grave dirt. The sheriff rode out with 2 deputies, hands on their guns. "Mrs. Colt," he called, "we need to talk." She didn't look up. "He came back," she said quietly, "just like he promised." The sheriff rode out slow. "Ma'am, your husband is dead." "I know." Her voice cracked. "I was there when it happened. I held him while he bled out. Railroad companies said it was an accident, a support beam. But I saw the marks on his neck, Sheriff. 2 punctures, clean, deep." She finally looked up, and her eyes were hollow. "He knew what bit him. He made me promise. If he didn't come back human, I'd wait. 3 years. That's how long it takes for the curse to settle or break. He said if he loved me enough, he'd fight it. He'd come back." The wind picked up, carrying dust devils across the mesa. "And did he?" the sheriff asked. Mary Ann smiled.
and it was the saddest thing he'd ever seen. Yes, but not the way I hoped. She told them the rest beside a dying campfire as the stars wheeled overhead. Thomas had come to her window on the 3rd anniversary of his burial, not knocking, just standing there in the moonlight, looking exactly as he had the day they married, young, strong, alive. She'd opened the door. "Mary Ann," he'd whispered, and his voice was the same. "I tried. God, I tried." "I know," she'd said. "I can feel it in me. The hunger. It's like a second heartbeat. I came back because I love you, but I don't know how long I can stay me." She'd stepped outside, into the night, and took his cold hand in hers. "You ever love someone so much it felt like a curse?" she asked. His eyes had flickered red in the darkness, just for a moment before fading back to brown. "In my world, it usually is." They'd walked to his grave together. She'd brought the shovel. "What are you doing?" he'd asked. "Giving you a choice," she said. "You can run, disappear into the desert, become what you are and leave me behind, or—" she'd held out her wrist, "or you can let me come with you, not as prey, as a companion, forever." Thomas had stared at her like she'd driven a stake through his heart. "Mary Ann, no, you don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking. I've had 3 years to think about it. I don't want to grow old without you. I don't want to die and leave you walking this earth alone for eternity. If you're cursed, then curse me too." The wind had howled through the canyon. "I can't," he said. "Then I'll dig you back up and drag you into the sun myself, because I didn't wait 3 years just to watch you ride away." The sheriff's hand drifted to his revolver. "Where is he now, Mrs. Colt?" Mary Ann stood, brushing the dirt from her dress. "Gone. He couldn't do it, couldn't turn me. Said he loved me too much to damn me." Her voice broke. "So I gave him the ring, told him to bury it where we first met. Said if he ever changed his mind, I'd be waiting." She looked at the collapsed mine entrance, where darkness pooled like spilled ink. "He asked me if I'd ever forgive him for leaving. And what did you say?" Thunder rumbled in the distance, storm coming. "I said I'd forgive him when the desert forgets the blood it's tasted." The sheriff saw it then, the bite marks on her neck, fresh, unhealed. "Mrs. Colt," she smiled, and her teeth caught the moonlight wrong. "He couldn't finish it, but that doesn't mean someone else won't." Behind them, the stranger's horse appeared on the ridge, smoke-colored, eyes like coals. The stranger himself stood in the saddle's shadow, watching. Mary Ann walked toward him, slow and certain, while the sheriff and his deputies backed toward their horses. "Some promises," she called over her shoulder, "don't end with death, Sheriff. They just change shape." The last thing they saw before the storm hit was Mary Ann reaching up to take the stranger's hand, and the stranger pulling her onto the horse behind him. When lightning split the sky, they were already gone.
They found Thomas Colt's ring a week later, buried at the old mission where he and Mary Ann had been married, right beneath the window where they'd carved their initials in 1881. The undertaker opened Thomas's grave to make sure. Empty, just like they'd suspected. But in the dirt, pressed into the bottom of the coffin, were 2 sets of footprints, one leaving, one entering. The people of Redemption don't talk about Mary Ann Colt anymore. But some nights, when the moon runs red and the wind carries voices across the mesa, travelers swear they see two riders on a smoke-colored horse, a man and a woman, holding each other like the world is ending and beginning all at once. Some say she found him again in the darkness. Others say he came back for her, curse and all. Either way, the desert remembers, and the grave stays empty. They say love and death share the same trail under the western moon. Some rode for vengeance, some for blood, but a few rode for love that would never die. This is Blood and Dust Chronicles. Subscribe for more stories written in blood, whispered by the wind.